Hello Year 8, it's Mrs Calloway here. We are doing lessons 10, 11 and 12. You're doing a grand job so far, so keep it up. As usual, there are 3 lessons here, but after each lesson, please do take a breather, take a break. We're not expecting you to do 3 lessons on the trot. So you'll need pen and paper to write on, and you'll need your booklets too, please. So your title can be Lesson 10. Let's get stuck in. For your do now, we'd like you please to think about these 2 questions. Number 1, what are the similarities between Ariel and Caliban? Number 2, what are the differences between Ariel and Caliban? We don't mind how you choose to do this. This is for you and you'll be checking your answers in a moment. You might want to draw up a quick table, similarities and differences, or you may wish to make a few bullet points. Pause the video now, give yourself a couple of minutes. Okay, so these are some of the things that you might have come up with. So similarities between these 2 characters, Ariel and Caliban. Both live on the island. Both lived on the island before Prospero arrived. Both are not human. Both are servants to Prospero. If you've got similar answers, then give them a tick. And differences. So we've started to see, haven't we, in the play that there are some differences between these characters. Ariel is kind and graceful. Caliban is rude and violent. Ariel does what Prospero asks. Caliban is resistant, and resistant means he's holding back, he doesn't want to do it. Ariel will be set free, Caliban will not. Okay? So these characters were on board the ship that was caught in the storm. Let's revise some of what we know. So Alonso, the king of Naples, was on the ship. Sebastian, his brother, was on the ship. Gonzalo, who is the counsellor to the king, which means he kind of works alongside the king offering advice. And Antonio, the usurping brother of Prospero. So if you remember, there's a bit of a revenge plot, I suppose, going on here in the fact that Antonio took his brother's dukedom away from him. So today we're going to meet another character from the ship. He is King Alonso's son, so the king's son. Now we know Ariel is playing some sort of a trick here with Ferdinand. Ariel is invisible and Ferdinand cannot see Ariel. Ferdinand can only hear Ariel's song. So imagine for a minute then, Ferdinand can hear, he's walking along and he can hear this song. Okay, now this passage here, this stanza is taken from Act 1, Scene 2. If you're in my Year 8 class, you know that if we were in class, I probably would subject you to my singing, but I'm not going to do that for this. So here goes. So Ariel says, "Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones a coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes, nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. Sea nymphs hourly ring his knell. Burthen, ding dong, hark, now I hear them. Ding dong, bell." So let's look more closely at Ariel's song. Now the song itself, you might be thinking, what on earth has she just read? And what we were kind of hearing there, we heard the word father in there. So Ariel is tricking Ferdinand into believing that his father has drowned, that his father has died from drowning. And in Ariel's song, Ariel is singing about King Alonso's body being in the bottom of the sea. And in that bit I've just read, Ariel compares Alonso's body to things that are found in the sea. So here are some of the things that Ariel used to describe Alonso's body in the sea. You've got a pearl and you've got coral. Now, if you're someone that likes a bit of a challenge and you like a bit of an extension and you're good at working independently, I might suggest that actually you could pause here. You might even go back to the slide before and spend some time yourself trying to interpret Ariel's song, trying to think about what that imagery is indicating to us. Okay, so if you're confident, this would be a great time for you to put your own skills to the test. If you're not so sure, or if you don't feel that you want to kind of go and do that at this point, then let's have a look together. So Ariel uses metaphors to describe Alonso's body. Just to remind you, a metaphor is a way of describing something, so it's not a literal description. You compare it to something it is not. So if you remember, that is what a metaphor is. Here's that part of the play again, and here I want you to have a think about what examples of metaphors can you find in Ariel's song. Now, I said we'll have a look at this together, and I'm going to give you some hints here, and then I want you to pause the video and think about what metaphors you can find. So I want you to think about that second line, of his bones are coral made. You had a picture a minute ago of coral, so think about what you can find there. You might also think about the third line. If you're thinking about somebody's eyes, and have a look at the metaphor that you might find. So let's give yourselves a couple of minutes, pause the video, see if you can jot down a couple of metaphors if you can. Hopefully you found these two. You might have found a couple more, but these two are the ones we're going to focus on. So the first one says, of his bones are coral made. And then the bottom one, those are pearls that were his eyes. So Ariel is getting Ferdinand to think about his own father, the king, and of his body floating to the bottom of the ocean. And this is kind of rich imagery that is being presented. So of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Again, if you're confident, pause the video here and have a little think about what you think this means. If you're unsure, I'm about to give you some thoughts here. Both Alonso's bones and coral can be found under the sea. So Ariel is confirming that Alonso died in the storm, but Ariel is also saying that Alonso is now part of the natural world and has become a part of the beautiful island. Ferdinand can be glad that Alonso is beautiful and peaceful in death. So Ariel's providing Ferdinand, the son, with a nice image here, a positive image that suggests Alonso's body, that Ferdinand believes to be at the bottom of the sea, is now part of this kind of natural habitat, this natural world, and this kind of coral reef, if you like. And the bottom one here, those are pearls that were his eyes. Alonso's eyes and pearls from the sea are also both found underneath the sea. So Ariel is emphasising that Alonso has drowned. But again, Ariel shows us that Alonso is part of the beauty of nature. And his eyes are like precious stones, so pearls are precious. They're unique and valuable. Ariel wants to remind Ferdinand how valuable Alonso was as a father. So this metaphor serves to show us that we as an audience get the impression that Ferdinand is quite reassured by the images that Ariel brings here, and that Ferdinand feels perhaps more peaceful about his father's death, or what he believes to be his death, because Ariel is singing this beautiful song describing his father's eyes like pearls now. And like we've said, pearls, we associate that idea with richness, with preciousness, with something that is valuable to us. What we'd like you to do with this lesson then is a piece of writing. So imagine you are Ferdinand. You have just heard Ariel's song. So think about what we've just learnt in this lesson with Ariel's song, and think about the fact you're going to include that in this piece of writing. You are going to write a message in a bottle. By the way, we're not expecting you to put your piece of work in a bottle, although if you want to, that would be very authentic, and you're welcome to do so, but we're not expecting that, okay? So you hope this message, this made-up message, will make it to Naples, which is where you're from. That's your home as Ferdinand. And you can divide your message into 3 sections. So the first section, explain what happened in the Tempest, the storm. So you want to talk about the shipwreck. You want to talk about who was on that boat. Obviously you were on that boat as Ferdinand, your father, the king, and the king's men were all aboard that ship. Number 2, describe the strange and wonderful sounds and spirits you have heard on the island. So that's when you want to reflect on what you as Ferdinand have heard and how you feel quite reassured. And number 3, explain that King Alonso is dead and that you are now the king. Because obviously Ferdinand, he'd be heir to the throne here, wouldn't he? You may not be sure whether you will ever make it back to Naples. So that would be a good way of finishing this message. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to give you an example. So an example piece of writing. Have a little think about it. And then afterwards, I'm going to show you this slide again so you'll be able to pause and do your writing then. So here's the example. People of Naples, please know that I am well, yet afraid. It is I, Ferdinand, the Prince. I have been washed ashore a strange island. The tempest threw us all into the dark depths of the sea and churned us in the deep waters. There was almost no hope for survival. The sky itself manifested into an angry beast. Antonio told us to sink with the king once we knew the storm was so great, and yet here I am, very much alive. Whilst I wander this place, I must tell you that I hear the most unusual sounds. A song, if you will. I believe it to be spirits, guiding me and reassuring me. There is some comfort here. One song I heard came gently on the wind, it felt, and it told me great things. I need to tell you, my father, the gracious king, is dead. The voice sang of his beauty and his peacefulness in death, however. The king is now in the clutches of the seabed. I hope the people of Naples will not be too grief-stricken to hear of my father's passing, but please know that this now leaves me to be king. I just hope that I can get back to you. Please find me if you can. Yours, Ferdinand. Okay, so that's just a quick example of the sort of thing we're expecting you to produce for this. So just to repeat that message then, imagine you are Ferdinand, you have just heard Ariel's song, you're going to write a message back home telling them what's happened to you, what you've been hearing, where you are, and that actually you're not sure what's going to happen to you next. What you'll need to do then is give yourself, I would suggest 15 to 20 minutes here. That would be long enough to produce a good piece of writing. So pause the video now and spend that time writing. Okay, you're right. I hope you've gotten well with your piece of writing. So let's do some checks, mastery checks that we like to do at the end of lesson in school. So when you finish, check your writing. Check 1, are there any run-on sentences? Check 2, does each proper noun begin with a capital S? Do check all the names if you use names, places. Check 3, have you used pronouns clearly and accurately? Think back to your grammar lessons to check that. Number 4, have you checked your spellings? Okay, so you've probably joined back after doing your piece of writing. Woohoo, well done! Super job if you've managed to complete your piece of writing. We're very proud of you. Keep hold of it, keep it nice and safe, that piece of writing that you've done. So let's finish this lesson by thinking about a quiz question. Here is a quotation from Ariel's song. Full fathom 5 thy father lies. That was the first line of Ariel's song that we looked at. What do you think this means? Which of these statements about this quotation do you think are true? There are 2 correct answers. A. Ariel is a magical spirit. He has been to the bottom of the ocean and seen Alonso's body. He is telling the truth. B. Ariel is lying to Ferdinand. Alonso is still alive. C. Ariel says that Alonso is deceitful. Ariel says that Alonso is a liar. D. Ariel tells Ferdinand that Alonso is dead and his body is beneath the sea. E. Ariel tells Ferdinand that Alonso is still alive. He is lying on another island 5 fathoms away. So think about what that song was supposed to be about. Think about the metaphors that we used as well to help you out here. Okay, give you a couple more minutes, see if you can jot down your answers. There's 2. And we're going to check. Ta-da! So B and D were correct. So B, Ariel is lying to Ferdinand, Alonso is still alive. D, Ariel tells Ferdinand that Alonso is dead and his body is meters beneath the sea. Now that bit, this idea of full fathom 5, is to do with how deep down in the sea Alonso, his father, was laying. Okay, so fathom, we think of that word to mean like deep. So hopefully you got your answers correct. And I know, oh, that's a bit frightening actually. Hooray! End of lesson 10, super job. And take a break, take a little breather, and I'll see you for lesson 11 next. Welcome year 8 to lesson 11. So you might want to jot down the title, maybe even the date if you want to keep track of the days. So lesson 11. We're going to start with the do now, and the do now reflects on something you looked at last year. So the course of true love never did run smooth. This is a quotation, hopefully you recognise, from A Midsummer Night's Dream. Just to remind you then, because this is going to be applicable to the play we're now about to do, what does this quotation mean? And then think back, how did it apply to the characters in A Midsummer Night's Dream? Can you remember that far back? So pause the video now, have a little think, jot down your answers. Here's your do now answers then. So if you've got similar things, give yourself a tick. This quotation suggests that true love sometimes has to overcome a number of difficulties. That's what it means. The course of true love never did run smooth. Makes it sound rocky and difficult. It also suggests that love is not true unless the lovers have had to tackle problems. If the relationship is never tested by difficult situations, it is impossible to know how strong the love is. So there's a couple of interpretations there. Last lesson we met Ferdinand. So Ferdinand has been washed ashore. He's been washed ashore by himself on the island. He thinks his father, King Alonso, died in the storm. And Prospero has sent Ariel to bring Ferdinand towards Miranda. So we might be thinking here that perhaps Prospero thinks it might be a good love match for his daughter to get to know Ferdinand. So Ariel does this by singing a magical song to Ferdinand, and as we know, Ferdinand likes the singing and is set to follow it. So I'm going to read from Act 1, Scene 2. I'm going to read it to you and then I'll give you the clip to where you might be able to find it if you would like to watch it afterwards. So Ferdinand says this: "The ditty does remember my drowned father. This is no mortal business. nor no sound that the earth owes. I hear it now above me. Prospero to Miranda. The fringed curtains of thine eye advance, and say what thou seest yond. So Prospero's saying, Miranda, look over there. What do you see? Miranda says, what is it? A spirit? Lord, how it looks about. Believe me, sir, it carries a brave form, but 'tis a spirit. And Prospero replies, no, wench, it eats and sleeps and hath such senses as we have such. This gallant, which thou seest, was in the rack, and but he's something stained with grief. That's beauty's canker. Thou mightest call him a goodly person. He hath lost his fellows, and strays about to find 'em. So we've got Prospero pointing out to Miranda, Ferdinand, and they're watching him as he's straying, to use Prospero's words, straying about, wandering about. And Ferdinand's following the song, just meandering, and they're watching him. And Miranda says here, I might call him a thing divine, for nothing natural I ever saw so noble. And Prospero in an aside, so aside means he's not talking to Miranda at this point, he's talking away from her to the audience. It goes on, I see, as my soul prompts it. So prompts means that he's encouraging this to happen. And then to Ariel, spirit, fine spirit, I'll free thee within 2 days for this. Ferdinand then sees Miranda, so hopefully you can start to see where this is going. Most sure the goddess on whom these airs attend, vouchsafe my prayer, may know if you remain upon this island, and that you will some good instruction give how I may bear me here. My prime request, which I do last pronounce, is, oh, you wonder if you be made or no. So here he's first of all saying, kind of, can you help me get my bearings? Can you help me find out where I am? And then my second request is, are you single, basically? When he's saying if you be a maid or no, that means, are you married? Are you with someone? And maid, the idea is that she's single. So Miranda replies, no wonder, sir, but certainly a maid. Ferdinand replies, my language? Heavens! I am the best of them that speak this speech, were I but where 'tis spoken. And this is the last page that we're going to look at. So Prospero, how the best? What wert thou if the King of Naples heard thee? And Ferdinand replies, a single thing, as I am now, that wonders to hear thee speak of Naples. He does hear me, and that he does I weep. Myself from Naples, who with mine eyes never since at ebb beheld the king my father racked. So Ferdinand's telling Prospero, look, my father's died. Because Prospero's saying, don't go around calling yourself the king. So he's toying around, he's playing around with Ferdinand a bit here. Miranda replies, alack, for mercy. Ferdinand, yes, faith, and all his lords, the Duke of Milan, and his brave son being twain. And again, Prospero speaks in an aside here, so it's only for the audience to hear him. The Duke of Milan and his more braver daughter could control thee, if now 'twere fit to do it. At the first sight they have changed eyes. Then he says to Ariel, delicate Ariel, I'll set thee free for this. To Ferdinand, a word, good sir. I fear you have done yourself some wrong. A word. And now Miranda speaks in an aside, so now she speaks to the audience, and she says, why speaks my father so ungently? This is the third man that ever I saw, the first that ever I sighed for. Pity moved my father to be inclined my way. So Miranda's thinking, what's up with Dad? Why is he not happy about the fact that I'm kind of eyeing up Ferdinand here? Because there seems to be something the matter. And Ferdinand replies, Oh, if a virgin, and your affection not gone forth, I'll make you the Queen of Naples. So he's making her a promise at the end here. Before we go any further, just to say then, that if you want to watch a version of this, and in fact, a bit of a heads up here, Helen Mirren, she's quite a famous actress, she actually plays Prospero in this. So Prospero in the play that we're looking at is obviously her father. But Helen Mirren in this one, it's played by a female, okay? So if you head to, there's a link at the top and it will take you to the play. If you're on SharePoint, you'll be able to quite quickly press the link on it. Start at 25 minutes and stop it at around 27 minutes. If you want to have a look at that scene that we've been reading. So it might be worth at this point having a look back, and what we're going to focus on really is how Miranda and Ferdinand feel about each other even though they've just met. So this is quite typical of Shakespeare and Shakespearean times, that you'd meet someone and then almost quite instantly fall in love with them and tell them about it, which is quite different from now. So if you're working on SharePoint, you'll be able to flip back to the slide before and have a little look. Okay, if you're working on YouTube, you might have to press rewind. So have a little read of those bits yourself if you can, and think about how they might feel towards each other. And what I'd like us to do next is think about the main points from what we've just read. And these points are in the wrong order. So this is a summary of what we've just read, but it's in the wrong order. And I want you to think about what is the right order. So we've got A, after falling in love with Miranda, Ferdinand offers to make Miranda queen. So think about when Ferdinand talked about her being queen. B, Ferdinand explains that he is now the King of Naples, as he thinks his father died in the storm. C, Miranda falls in love with Ferdinand at first sight. D, Prospero realises that Miranda and Ferdinand have fallen in love. E, Ferdinand believes that Miranda must be beautiful and strange, the beautiful and strange creature that sung of his father's death. So they might be quite tricky there, so you might need to again pause, and you might want to have a look back at the script here and have a little look at what we've just read. See if you can put them into the right order by using those letters. So again, you might want to pause at this point. Now here we have your answers, and what I've also done to help you out here is I've included some quotations which I'm going to help to kind of guide you through with where this happened, okay? But you're looking for the bits in green for your answers. So the first one is C. Miranda falls in love with Ferdinand at first sight. And she said, I might call him a thing divine, for nothing natural I ever saw so noble. So you've got some key words there, such as the word divine, meaning kind of heavenly and wonderful. And she says she never saw anything so noble. So anything so kind of almost beautiful, lord-like, a good man for her to pursue. Then it was E. Ferdinand believes that Miranda must be the beautiful and strange creature that sung of his father's death. That one was a hard one, because it said it in this line, most sure the goddess on whom these airs attend. So he thinks he's been following the sound of Miranda singing, when in fact he's been following Ariel. B. Ferdinand explains that he is now the King of Naples, as he thinks his father died in the storm. And he said this, myself am Naples, who with mine eyes never since the ebb beheld the king my father wrecked. So he's saying that the king my father wrecked suggests that actually he believes that his father was killed in this shipwreck. And D. Prospero realises that Miranda and Ferdinand have fallen in love. So Prospero, who's Miranda's father, realises that as soon as these two have seen each other, they've fallen in love. And Prospero said, at the first sight, they have changed eyes. That does not mean they have pop their own eyes out and swap them. Nope. Instead, it means that they are glancing at each other lovingly. They've exchanged fancy glances. And finally, it was A. After falling in love with Miranda, Ferdinand offers to make Miranda queen. That was the very last line we read, wasn't it? I'll make you the Queen of Naples. So well done if you got those correct. If you didn't quite get them right, not to worry. Have a look now at the order of that, and that should give you a good idea of what to think about at this point in the play. Now, we used this word aside, didn't we? And I said to you it meant when a character speaks aside, they talk away from who was on stage. So Prospero was talking away from Miranda. So in this aside, they talk away from the rest of the characters, and the character speaks to himself or herself or to the people watching rather than to the other characters. So it gives the audience more information. Prospero sees that his daughter has fallen in love with Ferdinand at first sight, and in his next aside, this is what he says. They are both in either's powers, but this swift business I must uneasy make, lest too light winning make the prize light. And give yourself a minute or two to think about the following. What do you think Prospero means by this? And why does he say it aside from the other characters? Now, to give you some help and some hints here, if we look back at the quotation, they are both in either's powers. So how are they feeling about each other that he can see? How are Ferdinand and Miranda behaving? He says swift business. Now, Ferdinand and Miranda have just met. So what is his concern there? Swift business. I must uneasy make. What does he want to do, perhaps? What are his intentions there? Uneasy. Make something uneasy. Lest too light winning, make the prize light. Okay, so think about what he doesn't want to happen here too quickly. And when it says about why does he say it aside from the other characters, why would he not, or actually no, who would he not want to hear this first of all? Who doesn't he want to hear this? Who doesn't he want to upset at first? So here are some possible thoughts you might have had. Prospero thinks that Ferdinand and Miranda have fallen in love too easily. That's what he was saying when he said swift business. It is too quick, is what he's saying. He thinks there needs to be some difficulty in their relationship. So he thinks that, you know, things need to be uneasy. Otherwise, it's making things like a prize light, he says. This will test Ferdinand and Miranda's love and make it mean more to them. So he's thinking their romance needs to be put to the test. We need to check if they really are in love with each other because they've only just met. So here we've got a quotation again from In Midsummer Night's Dream, how we started this lesson today. The course of true love never did run smooth. So what we'd like you to do is to write down your answer to this question. How does this quotation apply to Ferdinand and Miranda's relationship in The Tempest? So spend about 5 minutes writing this down, writing your thoughts. The course of true love never did run smooth. How does that apply? What is Prospero's involvement going to be? You've got the pictures there to help you. See if you can spend 5 minutes writing a few sentences. So make sure you pause the video. So at this point in the lesson, you're doing really, really well. This, as we head towards the end of this lesson, is a quick recap of something to think about. So we've already looked at the features of a Shakespearean comedy, what's normally included in comedies that Shakespeare produced. So normally they have a happy ending, usually with marriage. There are no deaths. There is at least one romantic plot. One plot involves characters who aren't kings, queens, princesses, lords or ladies. They are servants and tradespeople. These characters get into ridiculous situations. And there is confusion around who characters really are. So have a little think. What features of a comedy have we found so far in The Tempest? This is something you might just want to think about for a couple of minutes. If you want to pause the video, you can. So we could think about, actually, there's not been a happy ending yet, so that's not happened yet. There are no deaths in the play. Now, Ferdinand obviously believes that there has been some deaths from the shipwreck, but actually there haven't been any deaths yet. And now there is a romantic plot developing. So we can start to see the Tempest is falling in line with a Shakespearean comedy. And number 5, there is confusion around who characters really are. And Ferdinand is certainly confused about perhaps his father's death in particular. So there are 3 main plots in The Tempest, and this first plot is now emerging. Miranda and Ferdinand's love plot is the first plot we have found in the play. So we're going to call this plot 1 the love plot. This will help to avoid confusion when we read the other plots in the play. Okay, so just to be sure, plot 1 is going to be the love plot. So there's 3 strands, if you like we did with A Midsummer Night's Dream. There were different plots going on, and so this one is the love plot. Let's finish this lesson with a quick quiz question then. So which statement is correct? One answer. A, Ferdinand is glad his father died. B, Miranda's love for Ferdinand is unrequited. He does not love her back. C, Miranda has fallen in love with Ferdinand because of a love potion. D, Ferdinand has fallen in love with Miranda. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to have a little think. Prepare one answer, please. And hopefully this is the answer you got. So D was the correct statement. Ferdinand has fallen in love with Miranda. Okay. So hooray! End of lesson 11. Great job, year 8. And see you for lesson 12. I know, it's a funny picture I've picked, isn't it? Do you like it?
It's funny.
Yeah. See, even my daughter thinks it's a funny picture. So it must be good. Right, anyway, end of lesson 11. Welcome to lesson 12. This is the 3rd and final lesson of this week's work. So again, you might want to write down your title here. Make sure you've got your booklet. Make sure you've got your pen. Let's get going. For your do now then, just a couple of gaps to fill in actually. We know that someone and someone have magical powers. Who are they? Who are they? If you need an extension here, you might also want to think about, why did they use their powers? What powers did they have? If you need a bit more time, pause the screen. So we know that Prospero and Ariel, they were the answers we were looking for here. Prospero and Ariel have magical powers. Now, bit of information. Prospero, he can make people stand still and freeze. That's one of his powers that is worth mentioning at this point. He used magic. So we know he used magic in the past to free Ariel from the prison of a powerful witch. So he freed Ariel from a witch and now has Ariel under his control. He's also able to inflict aches and pains on others. So he does this to Caliban. Ariel can change the weather and create storms. So the storm at the beginning of the play, Prospero conjured it by asking Ariel to create this storm, this tempest. Ariel can also use song to lure people and fool them. And Ariel can also make himself invisible. And we saw those last 2 with Ferdinand, didn't we? So today we are going to return to the characters that were washed ashore on the shipwreck. So we're going back here to think about, well, what's happened now to these characters that were washed up in this shipwreck. So let's review the characters. So we've got Alonso, there he is with the crown on, he was the king. Sebastian, Ferdinand was on that ship. Antonio and Gonzalo. So here we have Alonso. Alonso is the king of Naples. And he has a brother. His brother's called Sebastian. There he is down there. So they've got a brother. They were on the shipwreck together. Gonzalo is his counsellor. So we talked about counsellor before. Someone that advises and guides the king. And Alonso has a son called Ferdinand. Alonso does not know that Ferdinand is still alive. Okay, so both Ferdinand and Alonso don't know that each other is still alive because they got washed ashore in different places of the island. So then we've got Antonio. Antonio is Prospero's brother. He worked with Alonso, King of Naples, to overthrow Prospero. So if you think back to the beginning when we started this play, we told you about this, didn't we? And we were talking about the fact that actually Prospero's brother has kind of betrayed him and overthrew Prospero, so that Prospero was no longer the Duke of Milan. And Antonio sent Prospero and Miranda out to sea. So in the very beginning, what's happened, to give this a bit of context, is it was Antonio who threw his own brother and Miranda out to sea, and they landed up at that desert island. And then he himself, in doing that, became the Duke of Milan. So these characters are together in this scene. So we're going to see Alonso with Sebastian, his brother, with Gonzalo, his counsellor, with Antonio, who is Prospero's brother, but Antonio is obviously friends with Alonso the king, and Ariel. And we're going to find out that Ariel has more magical powers. Ariel makes himself invisible in this scene. He enters and makes Alonso and Gonzalo fall asleep. So I'm just chuckling at what's happened to their eyes there on the pictures. And Sebastian and Antonio are left awake. So we're going to read Act 2, Scene 1, and it's going to be here on the screen for you. So enter Ariel, who is invisible, playing solemn music. That means quite serious, sad music. Sebastian, remember that's the king's brother, says, "We would so, and then go a bat fowling." Antonio, "Nay, my good lord, be not angry." Gonzalo, "No, I warrant you, I will not adventure my discretion so weakly. Will you laugh me asleep? For I am very heavy." By heavy there he means he's very, very tired. Antonio, "Go sleep and hear us." All except Alonso, Sebastian and Antonio. So Alonso the king says this, "What? All so soon asleep? I wish mine eyes would with themselves shut up my thoughts. I find they're inclined to do so." And Sebastian replies, so this is the brothers speaking, "Please, sir, do not omit the heavy offer of it. It seldom visits sorrow. When it doth, it is a comforter." So here Alonso's saying, look, I wish I could go to sleep as quickly as they've been falling asleep. And Sebastian says, try if you can, take up the offer of sleep, because it can be a comfort to fall asleep. And Antonio's still awake here. "We too, my lord, will guard your person while you take rest and watch you safely." And so Alonso says, "Thank you, wondrous heavy." So Alonso falls asleep and Ariel exits. And so Ariel's made them all feel sleepy here. And remember, they're washed up on this island. Sebastian says, "What a strange drowsiness possesses them." Antonio says, "It is the quality of the climate." So he thinks it's perhaps the weather that's made them feel this way. Sebastian, "Why doth it not then our eyelids sink? I find not myself disposed to sleep." Antonio replies, "Nor I. My spirits are nimble. They fell together all, as by consent they dropped as by a thunderstroke. What might, worthy Sebastian? Oh, what might? No more. And yet, methinks I see it in thy face, what thou shouldst be. The occasion speaks thee, and my strong imagination sees a crown dropping upon thy head." So the important bit here is that Antonio is suggesting to Sebastian, it's just the two of them now, awake, having a conversation. And Antonio, so you remember, we already think Antonio's a bit of trouble, because he already took his brother's place, Prospero, as Duke of Milan. So Antonio, who's betrayed his own brother, is now telling the king's brother, Sebastian, that he can imagine a crown dropping upon his head. So Antonio's telling Sebastian, look, I can imagine you being a really good king. I can imagine a crown dropping upon your head. Again, just to jump in and say that actually, if you want to watch a version of this, head to that link at the top of the page there. And from 54 minutes to 56 minutes, you'll be able to watch this scene play out. So let's just repeat that bit again. Antonio says this to Sebastian. What might, worthy Sebastian? Oh, what might? No more. Yet methinks I see it in thy face, what thou shouldst be. So Antonio's saying, look, I'm thinking you should be the king. The occasion speaks thee, and my strong imagination sees a crown dropping upon thy head. You should be the king, is what he's saying. So what is Antonio thinking about when he says these words? Have a think about what I've been saying just then. So again, Antonio thinks that Sebastian could become the king. Antonio can imagine Sebastian with a crown on his head, making him the king of Naples. That would make Sebastian the king of Naples. There we go, little crown fall on his head. So why would Sebastian want to be the ruler of Naples? What do you think about that? Why might the brother of the king fancy the idea? And what would be the advantages of being a ruler for Sebastian? Why might that be quite an inviting idea? Have a little think. So what we're going to do now is we're going to read the next passage in a modern version. So this is going to be in your booklet on page 14. So switch to your booklet at this point and find page 14. And as we read, think about these questions. So what is Antonio actually suggesting? And does Sebastian realise what Antonio is trying to say? So go and find your booklets, pause the video if you need to go and run off to find it, and then when you're ready to listen and read it, come back to the screen, okay? So page 14. So here's the next part of that conversation, the next part of the play. So remember, all the other characters are asleep, including the king, and this is Antonio and Sebastian. I'm going to read the modern version for you. So Sebastian says to Antonio, "Are you dreaming or awake?" Antonio says, "Don't you hear me speaking?" And Sebastian says, "I do, and it sounds like you're talking in your sleep. What did you say? It's weird for you to be dreaming with your eyes open, standing, talking, moving, but sound asleep." So this is Sebastian's response to the fact that Antonio's just said, "I think you should be the king." So Sebastian's saying, "I think that you're actually dreaming, but it's a bit weird that you're dreaming with your eyes open, and you seem to be talking to me, telling me that I'm going to be the king." So Sebastian thinks this is all part of a dream that Antonio's having. Antonio at the bottom there responds, "Good, Sebastian. You're the one who's sleeping if you let this opportunity pass you by without acting on it." And again, Sebastian replies with, "You're snoring, but it sounds like you're talking. There's meaning in your snoring." Antonio says, "I'm not kidding when I say this. I'm not joking around like usual. You should be serious too when you listen to what I'm saying. You can become a great man if you listen to me." And Sebastian says, "I'm hanging on every word you say." Antonio, "You need to do more than hang around. You have to act. I'll show you how." And Sebastian says, "You need to. I'm lazy by nature." So think about, what is Antonio actually suggesting? And does Sebastian realise what Antonio is trying to say? So Antonio is suggesting that Sebastian could become king. But to do this, he would have to be ambitious and act. while Alonso and Gonzalo are asleep. He is suggesting that if they killed Alonso, the king, that Sebastian would become king. And after a while, Sebastian realises what Antonio is saying. He does not say no to the idea immediately. So think about with the play here, there's kind of a proffer of hope that Sebastian has, because he's thinking, yeah, maybe I would like to take my brother's place. Maybe I would quite like to be the king. But at first he thinks Antonio must be sleeping. So now you're going to think about these characters and the perspectives that they're taking on here. So Sebastian, you begin unsure of what Antonio is suggesting. Consider when you realise that Antonio is saying you should murder Alonso. Think about how you would react here. Someone is asking you to kill your own brother to become the king. Antonio, you need to sound persuasive. You are asking Sebastian to do something terrible and very dangerous. You must be convincing. And Antonio is telling Sebastian to kill King Alonso. In Elizabethan England, and even today, killing the king would have been a terrible act of treason. Treason is a crime that harms your country or government. That's what it means. Someone who commits treason is a traitor. So if Sebastian goes ahead with this, of course he would be a traitor. And we've got to think about here, presumably Antonio's suggesting that it would be covered up, that they wouldn't want the people of Naples to know that this was happening. So if they went ahead with it, it's going to have to be done in secret, I suppose. Treason is a crime that harms your country or government. Someone who commits treason is a traitor. Let's look at how these sentences use the word treason. King Edward III established the law against treason in 1351, which was punishable by torture and public hanging. One of the most famous traitors in English history was Guy Fawkes. You might think of Firework Night there. A Catholic Yorkshireman who planned the Gunpowder Plot in 1605. And the third sentence, the spy committed treason by selling the government secrets to the enemy's prime minister. So all of those sentences use the word treason and traitor correctly. So have a look at these two passages. Which passage shows Antonio encouraging Sebastian to commit treason? Is it A, yet methinks I see it in thy face, what thou shouldst be, the occasion speaks thee, and my strong imagination sees a crown dropping upon thy head? Or is it B, thus, sir, although this lord of weak remembrance, this, who shall be of as little memory, when he is earthed, hath here almost persuaded. For he's a spirit of persuasion only, professes to persuade the king his sons alive. 'Tis as impossible that he undrowned, and that he that sleeps here swims. So which one is encouraging him to commit treason, do you think? And it's that first one, so that's the one we've seen and we've been talking about, imagining seeing a crown upon his head. So Antonio is telling Sebastian to usurp King Alonso. In Elizabethan England and even today, killing the king would be a terrible act of treason. So we'd like to now spend some time answering these questions in full sentences, please. Number 1, how does Antonio persuade Sebastian to commit treason? So think about that quotation. You might want to go back to the previous slide. You might want to look in your booklet too. Number 2, what would happen to Antonio and Sebastian if they were caught committing treason? What's likely to happen? And number 3, they think that it must be worth the risk to kill Alonso. What makes being a king so attractive? So this is where you need to think about that. Why would someone want to be a king? What power would that give them? So pause the video and spend some time answering these questions. So possible answers then. How did Antonio persuade Sebastian to commit treason? Antonio tells Sebastian he can see a crown upon his head. So this is him persuading, encouraging him that he wants to be the king. I've put the quotation there as well if that's helpful. Second one, what would happen to them if they were caught committing treason? Well, if you kill the king, it would be a terrible act of treason, and they'd probably be killed themselves. Okay. And the third one, they think it must be worth the risk to kill him. What makes being a king so attractive? So maybe you've thought about things such as wealth, being extremely rich. I mean, Sebastian, as the brother of the king, is probably going to be quite wealthy anyway, but he'll get to be the richest of the land. He'll have the most power, he'll have control over the people. So there is some appeal there. So the first plot we read in the Tempest was the love plot between Ferdinand and Miranda. So Sebastian and Antonio's plan to kill King Alonso is the second plot we have read. When we come back to this plot in future, we will call it Plot 2, the plot to kill Alonso. So we've now got two strands of the play, two plots going on. And again, we come to the end of this lesson and we're going to think about which of these statements are true. So A, Antonio wants to become King of Naples. B, Antonio made Alonso fall asleep. C, Antonio and Sebastian plan to usurp Alonso. D, Sebastian refuses to take power from his brother Alonso. And E, Sebastian is unsure what to do. He allows Antonio to tell him what to do. Prepare your answers. Jot down that letter that you think are for the correct statements. And I'm going to check in 3, 2, 1. So C and E, Antonio and Sebastian plan to usurp Alonso. Remember, that means to take the throne, the crown from him. And E, Sebastian is unsure what to do, so he allows Antonio to tell him what to do. Right then, so before you think you're completely finished, you have got one more thing to do for this week, and that is to find a Show My Homework quiz for this week that will look back at the lessons and be asking you questions like we've been doing. You probably know the drill by now. On the lessons that you've been looking at, and what your teachers are checking for. They're checking for your comprehension, they're checking that you're able to follow these recorded lessons and to see what you're kind of understanding. Okay, so you'll need to go and find the Show My Homework quiz. Also, just to say, you'll need to check in with your teachers. Obviously in the live lessons and on Show My Homework, your teachers will be communicating. Some of your teachers might be asking you to do asking you to add something additional with this for this week. They might want you to send something in addition to just the quiz. So you'll need to hear from your teachers to know exactly what that is. But everybody in Year 8 will be doing the quiz. Okay, so head over and find that in a mo. And last thing to say, you're fabulous and amazing. So well done, Year 8. Another great job. Well done for following our lessons. Keep up the good work and hope to see you soon. Bye.